Hello and welcome to week 4. Well, I guess it's not welcome to week 4. We are in the middle of the week. And I'm getting late putting this up. It is just week 4. Yay! We're about a quarter of the way through the semester, and I think we're moving along. There's some really great work being done, both in the forums and in your papers. I'm really happy with the level of discussion that I'm seeing. Um, I wanted to make a couple of comments on what I see in the forums, um, and then maybe encourage you to push it a little bit more. You saw that in the Democracy in the Individual forum. I forget what number it is. I was encouraging you to be a little bit more analytical, to refer a little bit more to the text that we're using, and to up the level of the discussion for the college level course. I think that's happening in this week's discussion. The the news stories and rights discussion. I think some people are doing some really excellent work there, and I hope that discussion continues. Remember, the point is you're participating in a forum just like you would participate in a classroom, and while you may not be forced to talk in a classroom, because it's an online course and because I don't know if you're paying attention unless you're typing something into your computer, you are forced to participate here. And that participation should be at the college level. I'd like to see you talking about your readings, talking about your ideas, and establishing clear ideas. Along those lines, let me say on the workshop, the alternative workshop specifically, the some of the most of the comments on the papers, you're being very supportive of each other, and there's nothing better than that. That it's great to be supportive. I'm very happy that you're being supportive. Uh, what, but most of the comments are positive, and I don't even mean positive. Most of the comments are, "Hey, you did a great job. I really liked reading your paper." I'd like to see a little bit more reflection, like, "Hey, I read your paper and it made me feel this way," or "I read this part of your argument and I really didn't understand the point that you were trying to get to." I'd like to see a little bit more um, uh, reflective discussion of the papers. So, as we get into our next workshop, and we'll figure out the technology a little bit better, but as we get into our next workshop, I would like you to really think about how you respond to each other, not just to not just to say to support each other, not just to feel good about your papers, but also to help each other develop really substantial arguments. Um, since we're talking about the workshop space, let me talk about revision for a minute. You saw that I posted a few handouts on revision, and or at least one handout, and then I pointed you to a couple other resources. Um, one of the things that you may be struggling with in the next week before our paper is due is, what are you supposed to revise on this paper when your teacher hasn't told you what to revise? A lot of students feel that way because they've only ever been in classes where they had a teacher who would say, "Fix this and this and this," and then they went and fixed that and that and that, and then their paper was fine. I don't approach writing that way, and I don't approach the instruction of writing that way. Instead, what I really try to get students to do is to become their own critical readers, to be able to learn how to look at their own writing and say, "Well, I understand how I'm getting to this point, but this point I don't think is fully fleshed out." Or even better, I can see how my readers would read this point, and I need to do more here. One of the ways that we do that is through the workshop. You have read other people's writing, you have commented on other people's writing, and the act of doing that, while it's useful to get other people's comments on your paper, it is far more useful for you to learn how to read other people's papers and then comment on those papers. What that allows you to do is to start to think about, how do other people read your papers? What else should you be doing in your papers? So I would suggest going back and rereading your paper. Think about how others read it. How do your fellow classmates read it? How would somebody who's not in this class, who's not read this material, read it? Would they understand your references to Dewey or Durkheim? Would they understand why you're talking about your public voice? Have you really defined that idea enough for your readers? Go back and think about how other people would read your paper. Then you could think about how your professor would read your paper, how your former professors would read your paper, how Barack Obama would read your paper, or how I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. Think about all different types of audiences and how they would interact with your paper. Then you could also follow some more practical, structural decisions and decision making in revision. And this is what that handout on revision was about. Start with your claim. If you don't have a claim, you don't have a paper. There's no point in making everything formatted correctly and spelled correctly and grammatically correct if you don't have a claim. So start with your claim and figure out what you're trying to prove. Is that claim sophisticated? Is it developed? Is it saying what you want to say? After looking at that claim, you then start to think back through the entire paper. How is the paper being developed structurally to accomplish the goals of that claim? Do you have a point-by-point argument in that claim? I'm sorry, a point-by-point argument going through your paper that will support that claim. On top of that, are you using evidence? Do you use your experience? And do you bring in points from your experience? And do you talk about that experience? Do you say why this is why it was meaningful? Do you figure out through analysis what do you help your readers figure out through your analysis why that experience is meaningful? In the end, you want to look at this paper as a structure that you have created, a structure that exists for one purpose, and that is to establish and develop and prove the idea that you want to prove. So look and think about how you're doing that throughout that paper, and then as you think about that, start to make revisions, revise how that structure is functioning, make the paper move from one level to the next. And since I do this in my classrooms, I say, you may have started your paper here. Through revision, I would like to see your paper get here. Or you may have started your paper here, and through revision, I'd like to see it get here. Or maybe your paper was just brilliant, all the way up here. I would still like to see it. You can't see where I'm going, all the way up there. Revision is about developing the idea. And it doesn't matter what the idea is. It doesn't matter if it was Plato's idea or Dewey's idea or your idea. That idea can be developed further. You can always develop ideas. You can always work on the way that they come out. You are expected to do revision in this paper. Whatever that draft is that you posted, I expect to see a different draft when you submit that paper. And the information on how to turn in your assignment shows you that. I want to see a original draft and a revised draft. And the point of that is I'm really trying to emphasize that writing doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen in an afternoon where you have 2 hours free, you can write a 3-page paper. Writing happens over time through a process, and you have to keep on revising. Your assignment has built within it a week and a half of revision time. Or in this case, your assignment has 5 days of revision time, although it had more time if people had posted their papers earlier. So you've got a lot of revision time built into this assignment, and I expect to see that you've used that revision time. I wanted to talk a couple minutes about the upcoming assignment. And the upcoming assignment you will see is asking you to do a argument or commentary where you comment on a news story through the lens of one of the readings or one or more of the readings that we've had. So we're reading a lot of stuff on rights and democracy, and we're reading things by politicians, and we're reading pieces by philosophers and by professors. So you've read a lot of stuff. What I want to see you be able to do is to look at an event happening in the news. And in our forums, the event of the most recent killing of yet another black man in the streets with his hands in the air has come up. How would you read that event through Dewey's conception of morality and democracy? How would you read that event through Malcolm X's ideas about human rights and civil rights. You're expected in this paper to take a news story and make it meaningful, and to make your readers be able to think about that news story in a way that they might not have thought about it before. That's what good commentators do. And we rely on commentators to help us, give us ways to think about the world. You're going to be reading more about commentary in next week's class. Again, the paper's not due for a couple weeks, but you should start looking for that news story. And of course, our forum this week is asking you to do kind of a rough idea with that, to go ahead and start to find a news story, and to go ahead and start thinking about how our week's reading about rights apply to that story. So we'll keep on working on that. Our readings this week were a little random. I mean, the way they come together, they're connected, obviously, but they're doing very different things. So we had a handout that was from a blog post that just talked about how human rights and civil rights are different. We had the Bill of Rights from our own Constitution that lists the first 10 rights that you are ensured that you have as a citizen of the United States. We had Zakaria's essay on Russia and how they are building an illiberal democracy. And then we had, I'm drawing a blank, Malcolm X, of course. Malcolm X, who was talking about whether or not African Americans should focus on civil rights or human rights. The idea of these readings is to help us think about what do people believe about rights and how are rights intersecting with democracy. Probably the most oddball one, if you have a picture of 4 different things and you got to pick the one that is the oddball out. The oddball one here is the Zakaria essay. And it's a little hard to see how that essay connects with the other ones. So let me just say a couple words about that one. The Zakaria essay I wanted to include because, the United States is not the only place where we talk about rights. The United States is not the only place where we talk about democracy. And we have, there are countries all over the world and communities all over the world that engage in these discussions. Zakaria's essay looks at Russia and talks about what's happening with Russia, and he compares it a little bit to China. And his primary point in that comparison is China has traditionally squelched human rights. Traditionally, civic rights have been very limited in China. But in Russia, the civic rights and human rights have been paid more attention to. Whereas, alternatively, economically, China has always been a little more powerful, and Russia has been struggling to catch up. What Zakaria is saying is, because of the focus now in Russia on control, on controlling a populace, on maintaining economics, on maintaining money running through the country, because of that control, the idea of a democracy is shrinking. It's becoming illiberal. That is, it's not for the people so much as it is an idea that people pass around to kind of pretend like they have democracy. Whereas in China, Zakaria sees a possibility that more democracy might grow as China expands into the world more and participates more in the politics of the world. Its democracy might grow because its people are going to demand more rights, more human rights, more civil rights. Zakaria's essay is interesting. It's interesting because it gives us a critique of another country. It's also a little bit of it's a Western critique of this country, of Russia and of China. We could probably argue with Zakaria whether or not we agree that his definition of liberal is correct or his definition of democracy is correct. Ultimately, I'm not sure that's our most useful reading. It's there because we want to make sure we understand that democracy and talks about democracy happen globally. But personally, the Malcolm X clip is pretty powerful. It's powerful as a statement on what we should be considering. How is it possible that you can say a group of people have civil rights if they have no human rights? What is the point of having the right to vote, or the right to drive, or the right to not have your house invaded by a military? What is the point of those rights if you can be shot down in the street for driving home from community college? I think it's an important question. And while that's our most striking news story at the moment, there are plenty of other news stories going on. And it doesn't have to be that most serious and most heart wrenching of story. You can look at any number of stories. Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the singing of the national anthem. Donald J. Trump Jr. releasing a picture of a bowl of Skittles to describe Syrian refugees. There are nonstop stories that are related to democracy, related to rights, and related to you. Take a look through them, find something to talk about, start building your ideas, use our message board this week as a place to build those ideas, and start writing a great paper. I look forward to seeing your papers on Sunday. Please don't be late with those papers. Get those in by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday evening, and then we can get moving on our second paper. I'll talk to you soon.